Well, I guess we will get started here and people will mosey on in as we begin. Hopefully, people will mosey on in, or it'll just be a nice, intimate setting today. All right, so we're going to be doing something from Parshas Toldos. We'll be doing it over a few weeks. So hopefully, by the time we get to Toldos, we'll be towards the end of it. So this is a discourse from the Alter Rebbe in Torah Or, and it's Re'ei Reach B'ni, which is the verse that he says. This is in the midst of Parshas Toldos, where Yitzchok had sent his son Esav to go and bring him some hunt, and Rivka overheard and then sent Yaakov in with some kid goats that were made up in a good way, and basically pulled the wool over Yitzchak's eyes, so to speak, although he had already been blind, so they didn't have to even use any wool. And after the whole discussion back and forth, Yitzchak was like so impressed with the new improved Esav. He said, Re'ei reach b'ni, see that the scent of my son is like the Kareach Hasada, like the scent of the field that has been blessed by God. And our sages tell us that well, I guess our sages tell us that the scent of Gan Eden entered in with Yaakov, right? So Yitzchak smells his garments and says that it smells like Gan Eden, and proceeds to bless him. Only after Yaakov left did the real Esav come in with the blessing, to find that Yaakov had already received it. So the Alter Rebbe will analyze the story on a mystical level, explaining one, why Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav in the first place. What was the point of this? And then why did the blessing have to actually go to Yaakov? And three, why did Yaakov have to trick his father in order to receive the blessing? The whole story is like, an enigma wrapped up in a paradox. So to understand all of this, so Yitzchak, so now we're going to start with the verse in the Parsha. Yitzchak said, see the smell of my son, it is like the smell of the field that Hashem has blessed, which is Gan Eden. Our sages say it was actually Takal Tapuchin Kadishin, it was the holy apple orchard, smelled, scent that came in with Yaakov. So we have to understand, if Yitzchak thought that the person he was blessing was Esav and not Yaakov, then why would he be so important in his eyes to give him such a praiseworthy description of having the smell of Gan Eden? Also, it's not understood. How did Yitzchak altogether perceive his son Esav? On the one hand, it says in the verse that Yitzchak loved Esav because, well, it says Kitzayid Befiv, which literally means there was a hunt in his mouth. So literally, he put food in the mouth of Yitzchak. So it's altogether strange, right? Oh, because he brought him some nice venison. That's why Yitzchak was head over heels for his delinquent son. That doesn't seem to make any sense. And on the other hand, we see, so our sages say that he deceived him, that Sayed, he hunted him, meaning that he hunted his father by being deceptive and concealing his true nature, by asking him questions in the service of Hashem, like he would ask him, how do you tithe straw? And how do you tithe salt to give to charity, pretending that he was careful in the service of Hashem? So he would he knew what to say to his father to make his father to keep up this charade, his father. So it says that Yitzchok loved him for these questions, implying that Yitzchok was convinced that Esav served Hashem. But yet, there's another part of the story that would seem to indicate that Yitzchok was well aware that his son was not with Hashem, because when Yaakov came in and said, and Yitzchok asked him, how are you here so quickly? And he said, God helped me come. God happened along with me and helped me come here speedily. Well, it was not the way of Esav to invoke God, right? This wasn't Esav's way, and eventually, after Yitzchak had felt the hands, because he didn't trust that it couldn't possibly be Esav, and he felt that the hands were furry, they were hairy, like Esav. So he said, "Hakol kol Yaakov," says your voice is the voice of Yaakov. Why? Because he was invoking God. Right? So 1 second, that means that Yitzchak knew that Esav was not one to invoke God. So seemingly he was aware of Esav's shortcomings. But on the other hand, he fell for his chicanery when it came to asking him questions in Jewish law. So what was going on with all of this? So now, to understand all of this, it'll be understood. However, the idea will be understood as follows. So Esav in the Zohar, Esav is referred to as the dross from the gold. So Sfisa de Dahava, the dross that is in the gold. So the dross is the aspect of the Gevura, severity of Hashem, manifest in Yitzchak, which is the level of the advantage of gold over silver. Okay, so Rabbi Katz explains. So just as raw gold has dross or impurities that need to be refined out of it, so too Gevura, severity of holiness, gives potential for unholy severity to exist, and that possibility needs to be removed. Let's discuss this just a little bit because it's coming up over here. So we know that the patriarchs Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov represent Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferes. Abraham represents kindness. That was his nature. Yitzchak represents Gevura, the serving of Hashem through Gevura. And Yaakov is the combination of the two, which comes out in Tiferes, the quality of balance and beauty and compassion, as explained in Kabbalah and Chassidus. Now, each of these, well, let's say particularly Chesed and Gevura, each one has an occupational hazard. Okay? So you can have a person of kindness, but you could have love and kindness becoming manifest in an inappropriate way, right? Loving a person in an inappropriate way or loving the inappropriate person. Clearly, love, is love always the answer? No, sometimes love is quite the problem. So, Gevura, severity, of course, is very necessary for serving Hashem. Because a person has to, when you talk about impulse control, you want to do something that you shouldn't be doing, and you keep your mouth shut. Instead of speaking those words that should not be said, you practice impulse control. Impulse control is Gevura, right? Self-restraint. The self-restraint part of the service of Hashem? Yes, of course it is, right? A major part every day. Every hour of the day, there's something that we should be holding ourselves back from doing, from speaking, or even from thinking. And all of this is coming from the Gevura aspect, right? This is the might. Also, a person needs to overcome the Yetzer Hara, right? They need to prevail over the negative impulse. Sometimes we need to prevail over negative people in the world, right? But can this severity manifest itself in a negative way? Certainly, right? Gevura can also manifest itself in being very judgmental of people, in judging others, right? And also ultimately it can even manifest itself in deciding to be the judge and the jury and to punish people. In other words, to administer punishment, hitting people, or in the case of Esav, killing people. So killing people is definitely an act of gevura, right? Now, sometimes a person needs to employ that. But we understand that kindness has its downside. Gevura has its downside, and that's what we're referring to over here. We're using the analogy of the crucible, of the refinery of metals. So metals, of course, gold is a wonderful metal, but when you have the raw gold, so it comes with its downside, the dross, and that's what the Zohar is saying, that Esav. So Yitzchok represents Gevura. Esav is his father's son. He also represents Gevura, but he is the dross that is in the gold. Kabbalistically, gold, which has a reddish hue to it, is connected with Gevura, with severity. I couldn't explain to you much more than that. Silver, which is white, silvery, is connected to chesed, and something which is red is connected to flesh. It's connected to Gevura. There might be other reasons. But in any case, now getting back to our topic, just as raw gold has dross or impurities that need to be refined out of it. Excuse me. Excuse me. So too, Gevura, severity of holiness, gives potential for unholy severity to exist, and that possibility needs to be removed. So the advantage of gold over silver is that it is a rarer commodity, shines more brightly than silver. So too the advantage of severity in the service of Hashem, being strict and demanding on oneself in every aspect, to keep everything in the Torah on the highest standard, is a tremendous level of holiness, and it's not so easy to attain. So somebody becoming that person who is an absolute he has absolute control over himself at every moment of the day, and to be very exacting, to do every mitzvah in the most careful way, that you have a golden servant of Hashem, so to speak. You have somebody who's on this level of gold. However, from this type of severity, it's possible to come to unholy severity. For example, feeling holier than thou and better than others because of keeping a higher standard, when in fact one is truly keeping a higher standard for the sake of Hashem, and it should only make a person more humble. Has anybody here ever experienced another person who was serving Hashem in a great way and held themselves like they were better than others? Yeah, of course you have. Maybe some of us have even experienced it in our own self, right? It's just it's a natural occupational hazard. A person is, right, and sometimes I joke around with people. I say, well, if you can't use your special observance to make yourself feel better than others, then what's the use of it, right? I say jokingly. The use of it is that you're serving Hashem. That's the whole point of it. And if it ends up boosting your ego, now it's a touchy area. It can boost your ego so that you feel good about yourself. That's good. It's good to feel good about yourself. I did my service and I feel good about myself. That's okay. But if it boosts your ego in a way that I feel better than everybody else, now the evil inclination has now gotten control of you again, right? You think you're serving Hashem, but in fact you're serving your ego. Now you think that you're better than others. So that's the dross of the gold. That is the occupational hazard, the negativity of the quality of severity. And from this, so Yitzchok represented the full level of Gevura, but that Gevura contained a dross. And Kabbalah explains that in a certain sense, that dross had to be removed from Yitzchok. Well, it was removed from Yitzchok and became manifest in Esav. So from the dross of this level of Yitzchok came forth Esav. As it says in the translation of Yonasan ben Uziel on Bereshis, says we're going to now take a look at a very strange thing, which is also brought in the Talmud, that the head of Esav is buried near the chest of Yitzchak. Did you guys know that? Has anyone ever been to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, to the Machpelah cave to visit our forefathers in Israel, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? It's an amazing experience. And what we maybe forget about when we're there, especially when you're at the place that hovers over the entranceway to the Machpelah, there's a little aperture, which is the kever of Yitzchak. It's in that room. Well, according to our tradition, also there would be the head of Esav. What's going on with, what is that about? Well, let's hear the story. First of all, on the spiritual level, the fact that Esav's head is placed next to Yitzchak represents how severity of unholiness, Esav derives his life from the severity of holiness of Yitzchak. So this is again a Kabbalistic theme, that all negativity is trying to draw its nourishment, its nurture from the holiness. Okay, so even things when a person is acting in a negative way, he's trying to compare himself to somebody who's holy. He's trying to draw nurture from that. So spiritually, that's the case. Does he explain here what the story is of how it ended up there? No, let me tell you briefly the story. It's to make a long story short.
That's not
When
Rabbi.
was coming to be buried, his son brought him there.
Sarah.
Esav came as well to lay his claim on his spot in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. So,
Rabbi. Nina, Sarah.
oh, I'm sorry. Are you asking a question? Unmute yourself. I didn't realize. Penina, you have a question? You'll need to unmute it. I just muted you. So I thought it was just background. I didn't realize you were talking.
That the cover at the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, and I said the prayers, and I prayed also when I was told by the custodian there that Esau was buried there as well. He didn't tell me just the head. I assumed that he was nearby to Yaakov because they said that Esau was buried there as well.
He said that who was buried there?
Esau.
Oh, he told you that.
Tradition.
Right. So according to tradition, just the head. What happened was, you see, there were two places in the Ma'ara left, and now they should go to Yaakov and to Esau. Well, Yaakov buried Leah there. So now when Yaakov was going to be buried in his spot, Esau came running from Seir, from Edom, running and saying, "Hey, the last spot is for me."
Yes.
It wasn't because Yaakov had actually purchased it from him. And Naphtali went to run to get the documentation. In the meantime, one of the grandchildren got very disturbed by this whole day, and he clasped his hands together, Esav, and severed his head from his body, and it rolled into the grave of Yitzchak. Okay, that's an easy to understand story, right? It's got to be rife with meaning and something going on there, right? Something very spiritual. But the bottom line is that what we end up with is the negativity always trying to draw nurture from the holiness. That's the bottom, right? So the head of Esav is buried near the chest. The fact that Esav's head is placed next to Yitzchok represents our severity of unholiness, which is Esav derives his life from the severity of holiness in Yitzchok.
I see. That
So
explains it.
that explains it on the mystical level, at least. But understand what is represented by the head of Esav being in the proximity of Yitzchak. So now we're going to take a look at the whole spiritual makeup and the correlation of the holiness and the unholiness. Okay, so we know that.
Do we know what happens to the rest of his body, or no?
Not that I can recall.
Oh, okay.
Not that I can recall. So we know that the whole system of spirituality, the 10 Sfirot, which are a channel, are special channels for us to connect in an internal way, in an intimate way to God. So you have 10 channels of negativity. Now, whereas the 10 channels of holiness, the Sefer Yetzirah tells us there's 10 and not 9. There's 10 and not 11, meaning that 10 is a number of integration, right? 10 is a number of complete integration. It is the perfect expansion of 1 to 10, and that the oneness becomes manifest in the 10, and so everything is integrated. When everything is integrated, what you have is 1. Right? Because ultimately, the whole purpose of the whole system of the 10th Sfirot is about coming to the oneness of Hashem. Integrate, the root of integrate is integer. Integer means 1. It means 1 digit. So when you integrate, everything becomes united. Like you have a plug that you need to plug into the computer. It has all of the pegs and all of the holes, and they match, and you can plug it in, right? Or even an outlet. It's got two prongs and two spaces in the outlet. You plug it in, and everything is connected in a perfect way. What if you have one missing? The connection is messed up. What if you have one extra? The connection is messed up. Because when you have one extra, also you do not have integration. This is all kind of a mystical understanding of this. Now, and we're now going to see that even in holiness, that's why generally speaking in holiness, 11 is seen as a number that needs improvement. A number that a number of lack of holiness, where there's a lack of holiness, and that's why it's 11. 10 is seen as a number of holiness, right? 11 is that place where you don't have the integration. And that's why we're going to see here that there are 11 spices that make up the Ketores. So the incense offering in the Beis HaMikdash, and he lists here the 11 spices, and they were ground up, and they were offered every day, twice a day in the Beis HaMikdash. So these 11 spices correspond to the 10 crowns of impurity, which is the life force from holiness that enlivens the unholiness that parallels the holiness. So even unholiness can only get its vitality from holiness. And this is the whole thing in Judaism. This is the whole thing in the Kabbalistic understanding. Ultimately, there's nothing outside of Hashem. Goyim believe that there is a negative force, that the Satan is an independent operator, and negativity is a mistake in creation that happened because of the Satan, and we have to do what we can to, Judaism doesn't believe in all of that. Judaism believes that Satan is a shliach, an emissary, a messenger of Hashem. He does not have any. He does not have any agency. He does not make any of his own decisions, right? And so the whole world of negativity is all part of Hashem's program. It's all part of Hashem's deep, profound program for existence. And we know in life, right? There's a lot of negativity in the world, in Jewish history, and in our own life, right? But this is all part of Hashem's plan, and we are ultimately meant to overcome this negativity. So now he says the 11 spices of the Ketores, the incense offering, correspond to the 10 crowns of impurity, because there is 11, and the point of 11 is that there's, what is it called? The fifth wheel, right? It's like, what is a fifth wheel? A fifth wheel means the wheel that doesn't belong on the vehicle, right? It's just there and it's extra. So that's like the 11th spice. So there's 10 crowns of impurity, but there's the 11th wheel, so to speak. So which is the life force that's going from holiness to enliven the unholiness that parallels the holiness. Ultimately, we are meant to transform the negative as well. And which service in the temple had the power of that transformation more than anything else? The Ketores, the incense offering. And that's why specifically in the realm of 11. So just like in holiness, there are 10 spheros, so too in Klipa, unholiness, there is actually present a light that comes from the 10 spheros of holiness, because there's no other way that it could exist. When I teach people, explain that nothing exists without a spark of God inside of it. So let's cut to the chase. Even Hitler, yes, Yimach Shemo. Even Hitler, Yimach Shemo, right? People oftentimes look at horrible things and they say, oh, there's no godliness in that. No, the problem is there is. And that godliness is in the state of exile, as we're soon going to see. And it's in a state of distortion. And calling people, animals or monsters, unfortunately, there's a problem with it, because number one, what did the animals do wrong, right? Animals aren't acting in such a way. And number two, no, the problem is not that they're animals and that they're monsters. The problem is that they're human beings created in the image of God, you see. That's the real tragedy. That's the real problem. But anyway, moving back to the Mimer. So you have 10 sfirot of holiness. You have 10 sfirot of klipa, of the negative. However, in holiness, the spheros are 10 and not 9. 10 and not 11. This is stated in Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. Whereas in klipa, unholiness, there are 11 corresponding to the spices of the Ketores. Meaning that you have, what's the opposite of integration? Disintegration, right? We don't think of the word that way, but disintegration, something coming apart, right? Something being distorted and not being there together in a full way. All wholeness in the world comes from the oneness of Hashem. It says this in Tikkun Zohar. All wholeness, anytime you find wholeness, that wholeness is coming from the oneness of Hashem. If you find something that seems very wholesome and very whole, but it's unholy, well, then it's not wholesome and it's not whole and complete. So let's go further. The idea behind this regarding the life force from Hashem that comes into holiness, it says that the hosts of heaven bow down to you, to Hashem, since through their awareness of the light force from Hashem enlivening them, they surrender themselves to Hashem and dedicate themselves to Him. Have you ever seen this? Have you ever seen the hosts of heaven bowing down to Hashem? Have you ever witnessed this? Well, you have to go out on a night that's not overcast, and in a place where you can see the stars. You could follow the moon. You could follow the sun as well, actually. So our sages tell us in Tractate Baba Basra that the Shekhinah is in the west. The Shekhinah is in the west. And when you walk into the Beis Hamikdash, where is the Holy of Holies? It's in the west. Directions can get confusing. We face east because we're in a country where east will bring us to the Beis Hamikdash, right? But when you walked into the Beis Hamikdash, you walked in on the eastern side, and everybody in the Beis Hamikdash was facing west. Just like any Jews that live in Jordan or, Abu Dhabi. You have Jews now living in Abu Dhabi, right? In Dubai. What direction do they face? They face west, because west will get you to Jerusalem, which will get you to the Holy Temple, which will get you to the Holy of Holies. So the source direction of the Shekhinah is west. That's what our sages tell us. And therefore, all of the constellations, I shouldn't say all, most of the constellations of the sky, including the sun and the moon, they rise in the east and they set in the west. Where does the sun rise? So the sun rises in the east. It comes up, right? Let's do the sun rising. And then it bows down to Hashem in the west. You see that? You see that bowing, that bow that is created by the orbit, by the path of the sun. The path of the sun in the sky is a bow. It's because it's bowing to Hashem. By the way, all of the zodiac and all of most of the stars at least in the not except for the northern sky is a different story going on there. So I can't explain that one. But most of the stars in the sky are also. So you have Taurus rises in the east and goes through the sky and bows down in the west. All of the stars, again, not all, most of the stars. Moon rises in the east and sets in the west. That is a form of bowing down to Hashem. This is what our sages say. Now, I understand according to science, there's other things going on and this and that. It's irrelevant. The point is that this is all in our perception. This is what it looks like, because this is actually for us to understand that the entire universe is nullified to Hashem. Do you know why the universe is nullified to Hashem? Because once you know Hashem, you're going to be nullified to Hashem. If you know God, and I don't just mean know God in a superficial way. If you know God and you really come to perceive the existence of Hashem, you're going to be totally nullified to God. And thus, that's what we're saying here in this little line, that if you daven this morning, you said this line in the Vayivarech David, you said, Utzva Hashemayim L'cha Mishtachavim. That the hosts of heaven bow down to you. So people sometimes read that and say, oh, that's cute, that's nice, okay. But that's actually describing the rising of the sun, the rising of the stars, the rising of the moon, and then the setting, right? It's bowing
Rabbi,
down.
Rabbi,
Please.
Why do we bow down during Modim in the Siddur? Why do we bow down to the east then instead of to the
We
west?
bow down to the east because we are facing and bowing down towards Yerushalayim. Okay, so and we're our point of connection as human beings is the Holy of Holies, which is in the Beis Hamikdash, which is in Yerushalayim. And Shlomo HaMelech, when he built the Beis Hamikdash, he said that all of the people, all of the Jewish people throughout all times, whenever they pray to Hashem, they're going to face this direction. That was his great prayers that he said when he built Beis Hamikdash there in the book of Melachim. He goes and he says that everyone will bow to, everyone is going to bow, because they're going to recognize this. So for us on planet Earth, epicenter of holiness is where? Jerusalem. But for all other celestial beings, the epicenter is the west. Make sense?
Yes.
By the way, in South America, they don't face west, they face northwest. East, rather. And in Ukraine, what direction do they face in Ukraine? Got to look on a map. They face due south. Eretz Yisrael is due south from Ukraine. Not all of you, well, mostly, right? You don't have to get a compass to know exactly, right? I spent some time in Australia, and they face northwest, because they're in the southern hemisphere.
That's because you're standing upside down.
Standing upside down, I got a little disoriented, and I had to keep pulling myself up from falling off of the face of the earth. It was not easy to get the straps attached to me. Anyway,
what happens if you become disoriented in the Orient?
But that's entirely accidental. Okay, we can go on. We can go on for hours this way. Occident is the west. Orient is the east. All right. So moving right along.
The Baal Shem Tov says there's no such things as accidents.
But there is such a thing as accident, right? How do we know? Because Tehillim says, Kirchok Mizrach Mimayrav, as east is far away from west, so you shall make far away from me my sins. All right. I want to share with you just a little insight, since we're talking about this, something that I think about, that I observed in the davening, and it will be helpful for us that if you daven and you say these words, right? You say, Utzva Hashemayim, we say, you are Hashem, our God, who created the heavens and the heavens beyond the heavens, right? All of the stars and everything that's in them, and all of these hosts, they all bow down to you, right? And then we continue saying, Ata, you are Hashem, our God, who chose Avram, and you took him out of Ur Kasdim, and you made his name Avraham, and you found his heart faithful before you. What's the connection? It always bothered me. What's the connection? We're talking about everything is bowing down to Hashem, and then you are Hashem, you chose Avraham. So it occurred to me that, like he's saying over here, all of the constellations, according to Jewish understanding, as the Rambam talks about in the first chapter of the Yad Chazaka, all of the constellations, all of the planets, they all have a knowledge of God, but that knowledge is built in. And that, of course, is the same with all of the constellations and their source above, which would be all of the angelic forces and all of the angelic camps and divisions. But you, Hashem, you know who you really chose? Who you chose was Avraham. Why did you choose Avram? Because that's the human being who can choose to serve you. So all of these different forces that are serving Hashem, the heavens of heavens, that's because they're programmed that way. But you, Hashem, you chose Avraham. Because what you really desire is not simply to be, you don't want to simply be served. You want that we should have the choice to serve you and that we should choose to serve you. And that's the connection, because we're saying that's all the heavens, that's what's going on there, but you chose Avram. So now moving along, so as long as you have an awareness of Hashem, you're going to be nullified to Hashem. But this is not the case with unholiness. It lifts itself haughtily like an eagle soaring high and brazenly refuses to humble itself to Hashem, its creator. So the thing with holiness, in most cases, is that unholiness, rather. So unholiness does not know God. If you don't know God, you're not going to serve God. You're not going to be nullified to God. Like Paro said, Lo yadati et Hashem, I don't know God, and the Jewish people I will not send. You're coming and telling me that God is saying I should do this. I don't know God, and I'm not going to send the Jewish people. So our actions are based on our narrative, which is based on our awareness. What is our awareness? If we have an awareness of God, then like the constellations of heaven, we're going to serve God. We're going to be bowing down to Hashem. But with unholiness that lifts itself haughtily like an eagle soaring high and brazenly refuses to humble itself to Hashem, this is because the life force that comes into them is in a manner of exile. In other words, there's godliness inside of them, but they are unaware of it. There's a dissonance between the reality that's giving them life and their awareness. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a lot of teenagers, right? So teenagers, where do they get their clothes? Where do they get their food? Where do they get their shelter? Where do they get their allowance? Where do they get their education? Where do they get anything that they possibly have? They get from mom and dad. And who, in some cases, do they detest more than anybody on earth? Mom and dad. Thank God that's not always the case, but you find that situation, right, where there's this disconnect between the reality and how they perceive the reality. And that means that the life force is in a state of exile. Therefore, even when the life force from holiness comes into them, they do not surrender their ego. Just the opposite. They lift their ego up like a soaring eagle, And the life force that comes into them becomes absorbed into their being in a way that they the word absorbed is maybe not the right word. It becomes swallowed. It becomes swallowed into them, meaning not absorbed. It's actually absorbed is the wrong word. The life force that comes into them is not absorbed, because if it was absorbed, it would be integrated. By way of analogy, somebody can teach me the importance of exercise, and I can take a whole class on the importance of exercise, and I could tell you, I could give over that class, and I could give you jokes, and I could give you analogies, and I can give over that whole class, but I don't exercise. I do exercise, but I'm just saying in this analogy, I don't exercise. I don't exercise. So did I absorb the message? No, I didn't absorb the message. I heard the message, and in Hasidic nomenclature, we say I swallowed the message. Swallowing meaning swallowing but not absorbing. Nivla is the Hebrew word. So it's not absorbed with, I didn't absorb it. Absorbing mean I got it. Or as they used to say, grokked. I grokked the message. So there's getting the message, really absorbing and internalizing the message. Then there's hearing the message, but it changing me, absolutely zero. Right? This is life. We all have things that we've heard that hasn't affected us, right? So this is with the level of evil, with negativity. They get the life force from God, but they don't acknowledge it. Oh, like one of the great lines I once heard from an ungrateful child. I didn't ask them to bring me into the world. What? It's your problem. You made me. You decided you wanted to have a child, and that's your problem. Why am I beholden to you? Because you brought me into life, and you brought me into a
There was a response to that because you may not have. I may not have asked. You may not have asked to bring you in, but I can take you out.
that would have been maybe 40 years ago. That's
That's
old
exactly
advice. But
when it was. That's
today,
exactly what it was.
today, if a child would say that, the response is you hug them and you say, "I'm still so happy that you're here," and even if you don't appreciate it, that's okay. We love you anyway. It's a good question, but you can't address what you cannot do under any circumstances, engage in a conversation with that inanity, right?
I say my Avi, everybody at the age of 2, you say you have the age of no. That's when the no's start.
Right,
Do
yes.
this, no. Do this, no, no, no. Avi never did the no's. Avi, please do this. Why?
Why?
That's what we have to deal with. A why. Baruch Hashem, we answered.
What do you expect from the son of an attorney?
Well, Baruch Hashem. I look, of all my failures or whatever, in certain areas, I feel totally Hashem was very good to me, and this was 2 things. And a son and a daughter, lots I don't agree with. Who am I? But on basic
Yeah,
questions, trust or not trust, good or not good, yeah.
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem is right.
Wow, how is it possible that they can receive life and existence from holiness? If the life force becomes absorbed into them, it becomes swallowed into them. In other words, if it's not integrated within them, then how can they receive it? Right? So if I take a battery and I put it into a device, but I don't connect it, I say, well, it has a battery, but it's not connected. If it's not connected, how's it giving it energy? And in a sense, this divine information, like I told you, I can hear the talk, right? I can hear the talk, but if I'm not plugged in, if I'm not plugged into it, it's going to have zero effect on me. So if that's the case with the holiness, how can the holiness is there, the battery is there, but they're not plugged into it? How is it giving them energy? This is a kind of a Kabbalistic question.
How's it giving who energy?
The negative side.
Oh, okay. If it's not plugged into,
They have it, they swallowed it, the battery is there, but they're not plugged into it. How's it
right.
giving them energy? How is it possible that they can receive life and existence from holiness if that life force becomes absorbed into them, meaning absorbed, meaning not absorbed, meaning swallowed but not connected, right? And loses its connection to the source of life? How can it continue to animate them if it is trapped in unholiness? And so we're going to give the Kabbalistic answer to that. And the Kabbalistic answer to that is also going to let us know what the level of Esav was. And because there is some transitional state between the positive and the negative that is able to transfer energy without becoming absorbed, without becoming internalized. I think we'll get to that maybe next time because it's 12:55.
I'll try.
But I just, because it's going to be the answer to the question. In
So
the meantime,
Rabbi,
yes,
earlier you were talking about the forces of unholiness, and I thought you were saying something. At first, you said 10, and then it's 11. So I thought it was always 11. So is that the answer? It's 11.
it's a good question. The point is that that's how I tried to answer the question. So it says in Tanya, it says, Eser Kisrin de Misavu, quoting from the Zohar, 10 crowns of unholiness. That is what the Zohar says, 10 crowns of unholiness. So what is 11? So I'm trying to explain, to the best of my knowledge, that it's like there's an 11th wheel that causes disintegration within it. So it's 10, but you're right, it's 10 that's actually 11. It's still referred to, the Zohar still refers to it as 10 crowns of impurity.
But I thought we have 11 ingredients to the incense
So we're
because
going to
there's
see that
11.
the 11th spice is the Levona, and it has a different kind of process. So there's 10 of the spices that have to do with the internal processing of the negative. But the Levona, well, we may as well just read this next paragraph. This is the idea of the Levona, frankincense, which is the 11th of the spices of the Ketores, which represents the makif, the encompassing light, which encompasses them from above and does not become absorbed inside of them. So basically, the 10 are the internal workings. Here, let me ask you a question. Do we have 10 spheros or do we have 11 spheros?
10.
Well, I could actually count 11 for you.
I can get 12 or 13 actually.
Well, no, you in our system we count Chachma, Bina, and Das, right? Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. But other systems count Keser, Chachma, Bina. Well, one second. What if I count Keser and I also count Das? How many do I have? In other words, if I take all possible spheros that are counted, we have 11, except there's a Kabbalistic work. I don't know what the source is, but it says when we count Keser, we can't count Das. And if you count Das, then you can't count Keser. That's actually what the 10 and not 11 is referring to. It's referring to this issue of Das. But what is Das all about? Das is about integration, right? So if we have the integration, we're talking about the internal components and not the transcendent component. With the negative side, they have both the transcendent component and the internal components, which sounds like a good thing, but he says here that that's the makif encompassing light. I don't totally understand this, but I'm just sharing with you what it's saying here. The Levona is the 11th spice. It's the 11th level. So why are there 10 crowns of impurity? Because it's 10, not including the 11th, which is the encompassing. That answers your question, at least mathematically.
Like the Valatorium, he would each letter plus one for the word if necessary.
It might be related to that, possibly. So we'll continue Mirz Hashem next week. Any questions, comments? Good story.
Beautiful.
Jokes?
Thank you,
Beautiful.
Rabbi.
Thank you for joining. We'll see you, Mirz Hashem, next week.
I
Thank you,
gave
Rabbi.
a thing last week. I don't know if you guys here heard it, they can drop out. But I wanted to relate to you the connections between the Teva from Noach to the Aron in the Mishkan,
Okay.
as each one being the vehicle to transcend universes. I'm using words poorly, but the idea was this. What was the idea behind the Mishkan? The centerpiece of the Mishkan was the Aron. What was inside the Aron? The Luchos, Etzba Elokim, which is immaterial carving into stone, which is the hardest thing we have, and all the what's the words? Not inconsistency, chas v'shalom, but the opposites, the diametric opposites that have to live together in this altered space that is not ours. And the way to look at it is basically we have our space, our universe, and then we have the space outside of our universe, which would include certainly ilamas that Hashem is in that we are not. See, he says, you look at the luchos and you look at the Aron, you have only two places in the Torah where you have language like the tzipisai, mebayis u'michutz, and those are the construction of the Aron Kodesh, which was one type of wood covered on the inside and on the outside with gold, and then put on top a kapores.
Right.
And the box that we were in, the teva, which was a different kind of gopher wood, which was inside and outside with lime, not anything gold or nice. And also other language that is you kafarta, you have kapiris kafarta. You have lots of language that is, and David Foreman gets into it extensively in terms of connections. The idea that for the Shekhinah to reside in our world, the Shechanti B'Soich, you needed to have this Aron. It needed to have this Aron. We needed to have this Aron as the interface. When Hashem destroyed the world with Noach, what did he do? He undid the Bria. He undid the Bria. What was, you have to go back. That's why you had Mayim. That's why it was with the flood. Because what did you have before Bria So'ilah? You had Toyu Uvayu, Beruach Hashem, Mirachefes, Al Pnei Amayim. So there was water there. So now we were existing somewhat in Hashem's world, for lack of a better term.
Liminal space, they call it.
What?
Liminal space is what they call it today. A transitional space.
But we needed that protection around us. Then you get questions of how did they all fit into the table? How did the Aron not have space? And, you know,
you have
it answers a lot of different questions.
Transcending space element.
Right, because space has nothing to do with it. The fact that we were in it has nothing to do with three-dimensional space. It was the teva.
Right.
It allowed us to travel into the other universe, as it were.
The new universe.
Well, will bring us back. I don't know.
Beautiful.
Whatever. David Foreman, his Aleph Beta was just phenomenal.
Very nice.
The Twilight Zone.
What?
He traveled into another dimension. Some of us call it the Twilight Zone.
Right. Well, I don't know why he called it Twilight Zone.